The Seerah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, part 13. So now the Quraysh, by drawing lots, they got no share in the treasures of the Kaaba. So now their attention then, after this disappointment, turned towards the Zamzam well itself. And they said that this Zamzam well should be distributed amongst us. Everyone should have ownership. And they said, Ya Abdul Muttalib, innaha bi'ru abina Ismail, wa inna lana fiha haqqan, fashikna ma'aha fiha. That, O Abdul Muttalib, this well is the well of our father Ismail alayhi salam. And we're all descendants of Ismail alayhi salam. And so we have a share in this well. And we have a right also in this well. So, therefore, share this well with us. There should be shared ownership of this well between us. So Abdul Muttalib, he said, Ma ana bifa'il. He said, I'm not going to do that. He said, the well belongs to Banu Hashim, to my clan, and not to the whole of the tribe, not to all of the Quraysh. It belongs to my family, and it'll stay in my family. Why did he say that? He said, because I am the chosen one. I am the one who has been divinely inspired and divinely guided to find the Zamzam, well. So I'm going to keep it. So now this dispute broke out between them. The Quraysh are saying that there should be shared ownership between the Quraysh for the well of Zamzam. And Abdul Muttalib says that, no, my family, the Banu Hashim, are the rightful owners. Now, in those days, as I've mentioned before, when they had a dispute, then the way they would settle it is that they would go into the well, into the Kaaba, to the idol of Hubl, and they would take their arrows, write their names on, and they would draw their lots. And that's how they would decide their disputes. But sometimes, if there was a very grave matter which could not be decided easily, then for very important matters, instead of just drawing lots and drawing arrows, they would go to people who they thought were divinely inspired, who had knowledge of the unseen, who we would call fortune tellers. And in Arabic we call them kahins, soothsayers, or oracles. So they would go to these people, and then these people claimed to have divine knowledge, and so people listened to whatever they said. So they decided in this matter, when they couldn't agree as to how the Zamzam well should or should not be shared and who should have the ownership, they decided to visit a famous and well-known, well-respected fortune teller, soothsayer, a kahina, who was from the Banu Sa'ad, and she lived near Syria. So now the Quraysh make preparations for the journey, and Abdul Muttalib collects some of his men from the Banu Hashim, and so they all set off together to visit this kahina who will settle the matter for them, and they agree that whatever she says, we're going to accept her judgment. Now this journey is long, and it's far, and it's arduous, and it's very hot, and in the scorching heat of Arabia in the desert, eventually the water of Abdul Muttalib and his Hashimite companions runs out. So now they're dying of thirst. So the other party that is with them, the opposition, is also traveling with them, the Quraysh. So they turn to the Quraysh and they beg them for water. They say, please give us water. So they refuse to give them water, and they say that if we give you water, then we will also die, and the calamity that has come upon you will also befall us, so we're not going to give you any water. So Abdul Muttalib then realized that his situation and the situation of his companions is dire and is desperate, and he realized that we may die now of thirst. So then he came up with an idea. He said to his companions, he said, every person must dig his own grave with his own hands, so that when he dies, his companions can just place him in that grave, or just before dying he can go and lay in his grave, and then the remaining companions can just throw the sand on top of him. And by doing this, it'll be easy to bury us. Otherwise, if we don't dig our graves and we die one after the other, then when one person dies, the others will be too weak and too thirsty to dig the grave, and so his body will not be buried, and so our bodies will just be left out. So he came up with this good idea. He said, let's everyone dig our own graves. So they started digging their own graves with their own hands, and the Quraysh are sitting at a distance watching all of this, watching that these guys are desperate for water. They did not give them water, and then they see that they're so desperate and so close to the death that they're stumbling, falling over, and they are digging their own graves. After they had dug their graves, and they are now waiting for death, Abdul Muttalib, because he was a courageous man, an intelligent man, a man of honor, he was a chief, he then stood up and he said, look, this isn't right, that we just surrender ourselves into the jaws of death. This is not befitting behavior. As long as we have life in us, we should try. So let's search for water. Let's ride out to the surrounding tribes. Perhaps we will find some water. It's not good for us to just give up so easily and to just surrender ourselves to death. So he stood up. And he was fired up. And so he was like a man on a mission. He stood up and then he said, come on, let's go. And then he got onto his camel. The Quraysh are watching all of this. And when he got onto his camel to ride off, the hoof of his camel hit the ground. And just as thousands of years before, upon the crying and the desperation of Hajra alayha salam, Allah Ta'ala divinely helped her by sending Jibreel alayhi salam, and where her baby Ismail alayhi salam's foot was rubbing on the ground and struck the ground, that is where Jibreel alayhi salam struck the ground and the fountain of Zamzam came out. In the same way here, Allah Ta'ala's help was with Abdul Muttalib. He had divinely inspired him to find the Zamzam well, and now he was divinely helping him to keep the Zamzam well. And so Allah Ta'ala's help came. Abdul Muttalib's camel's hoof hit the ground, and just as it had happened with Hajra and Ismail alayhi salam thousands of years before, in the same way now it happens in the progeny of Ismail alayhi salam to Abdul Muttalib, that where the camel's hoof hits the ground, a fountain of water shoots out of the ground. And everyone is astonished. And Abdul Muttalib, he jumped down from his camel and he فَكَبَّرَ Abdul Muttalib, he shouted the takbir, and all his companions shouted the takbir, and then Abdul Muttalib drank from the water and he gave to his companions, and so they came back from the brink of death, and then they give their animals the water to drink until they were satiated. And then Abdul Muttalib did not do as the Quraysh had done by not letting him drink. When he had asked them for water, they had refused him. But Abdul Muttalib was a generous person. He was not going to follow their example. Instead, after he had drunk and he had given his friends and his companions, his animals, their animals to drink, he turned to the Quraysh who were sitting at a distance watching all of this, and he said, "Halumma ila al-ma'i waqad saqana al-ma." He said, "Come and drink the water, There's plenty of water here, come drink. We have been given water, Allah Ta'ala has blessed us with water. Here, come and drink. So the Quraysh were astonished by all of this. They understood that this is something special.